TIFU by messing around in Singapore and getting caned as punishment. I was born in Singapore, spent most of my childhood abroad, and only moved back at 17. Maybe if I grew up there I would have known more seriously how they treat crime and misbehavior. I didn't pay much attention in school and got involved in crime in my late teens and earlier 20s, eventually escalating to robbery. I didn't use a real weapon but pretended I had one. And it worked well for a while in a place where most people are unaccustomed to street crime. Until inevitably I eventually got caught. This was during the early pandemic, so they maybe factored that in when giving me a comparably short prison term at only 2 years. But I think the judge made up for it by ordering 12 strokes of the cane. A bit higher than I expected. I knew it would hurt, but I had no idea how bad it actually would be. Prison was no fun, of course. But the worst was that they don't tell you what day your caning will be. So every day I wondered if today would be the day. I started to get very anxious after hearing a couple other prisoners say how serious it is. They left me in that suspense for the first 14 months of my sentence or so, until I began to try to hope, after hundreds of false alarms of guards walking by the cell for some other purpose, that maybe they'd forget or something and it would never happen. But nope. Finally I was told that today's the day. I had to submit for a medical exam and a doctor certified that I was fit to receive my punishment. My heart was racing all morning. And finally I was led away to be caned. It's done in private, outside the sight of any other prisoners. It's not supposed to be a public humiliation event like in Sharia. The punishment rather comes from the pain. I had to remove my clothes and was strapped down to the device to hold me in place for the caning. There was a doctor there and some officers worked to set up some protection over my back so that only my buttocks was exposed. I had to thank the caning officers for carrying out my sentence to teach me a lesson. I tried to psyche myself up thinking, okay, it's 12 strokes. I can do this. But finally the first stroke came. I remember the noise of it was so loud and then the pain was so shocking and intense. I cried out in shock and agony. I tried then to get away, but I couldn't move. By the third stroke I could barely think straight. I remember feeling like my brain was on fire and the pain was all over my body. Not just on the buttocks. I think I was crying, but things become blurry after that in my memory. I remember the doctor checking to see if I was still fit for caning at one point and giving the go ahead to continue. After the 12th stroke they released me, but I couldn't move. 2 officers had to help me hobble off. They doused the wounds with antiseptic spray and then took me back to a cell to recover. My brain felt like it was melting from the pain, so my sense of time is probably a bit distorted from that day, but I remember I collapsed down in the cell and either passed out or went to sleep. But little did I realize that the real punishment of caning is more the aftermath than the caning itself. When I woke up the pain was still incredibly intense, but not so much that it was distorting my mind, which almost made it worse in a way. My buttocks had swollen immensely and any pressure on it felt like fire that immediately crippled me. Almost worse than a kick to the groin. My first time I felt like I had to use the toilet. I was filled with dread because of the pain. I managed to do it squatting instead of sitting. But still, just the motion of going, 2 inches agitated all the wounds and the pain was so sudden and intense that I threw up. I tried to avoid eating for a week because I didn't want to have to use the toilet. After a couple days the officers told me I couldn't lay naked in my cell anymore and had to wear clothes. This was scary because they would agitate the wounds. I spent most of the day trying to lay face down and totally still because even small movements would hurt so bad as the clothes rustled against it. This continued for about a month before things started to heal. And even then, these actions remained very painful. Just not cripplingly painful. I didn't sit or lay on my back for many months. By the time I got out of prison I had mostly recovered, but even to this day, there are severe scars and the area can be a bit sensitive. It was way worse than I expected the experience to be. I know it's my fault, but I do wish my parents had warned me more about the seriousness of justice. Here when we moved back, though I know I wouldn't have listened as a stupid teen. Thankfully they were supportive when I got out and I'm getting back on my feet literally and metaphorically. TL. Doctor got caught for robbery in Singapore. Found out judicial caning is way worse than I ever imagined. I found a video of a caning that got leaked many years ago. Warning. Graphic. That was in Malaysia, but Singapore uses the same method. Looks like that poor fellow only got a couple more strokes than Op was sentenced to. The first couple don't seem so bad. But by the end, yikes. That's worse than I expected it to even look. The whole butt seems to be ruined? How does one even heal from that? Question about the caning here. Does the skin split open from the caning? If it does, were there a lot of bleeding? Did you need stitches? You wish your parents warned you? Man, you moved back at 17 and went committing crimes in your 20s. Anyone in Singapore for more than a few days would have known about the severity of criminal punishments. Well, at least you know now. At least you didn't foo to the point of dealing hard drugs. When I read the title I thought you scissor messed around scissor and got caught for adultery. Didn't realize it was actually for robbery. You didn't mess around, you committed armed robbery. You didn't hear about the guy who got lashings for spray paint tagging in Singapore. It's kind of a known deal that you don't go to Singapore and commit crimes. I do wish my parents had warned me more about the seriousness of justice here when we moved back. I don't think any parent thinks, hey, I should probably have that sit-down talk with my son now about how he shouldn't commit armed robbery. Because of the caning though. Not that instilling lifelong trauma and fear into another, potentially multiple, human being. Quote, why would you think they'd need to warn you not to commit a crime? Why would you think that you'd be swayed by the, you'll get a pretty yucky spanking, part if you don't care about the destroying another person's life part? Yes. You feud. You literally committed armed robbery. Even if you were pretending to have the weapon, you coerced them to part with their money and belongings under threat of bodily harm and injury. Come on. This is not messing around. This is an actual crime and you were lucky you got away with just 2 years of jail. I don't even know why you thought Singapore would be relaxed on their justice system. We warn you on the plane ride in that if you come here with more than a certain amount of controlled drugs you will be subject to mandatory death penalty or life imprisonment. This is your mistake and your burden to bear. Edit. Typo. As a Singaporean, why would you do something like this? There are tons of benefits and schemes if you can't afford essentials. Why would you commit armed robbery, especially in a country where punishment are very harsh and overall safe? I don't understand the thought process here. An acquaintance of mine knows someone who committed rape in Singapore and was sentenced to the legal maximum of 24 strokes. Well deserved. I wonder how big of a difference there is in the effects of 12 vs 24. Are there diminishing returns, you think? Or would it be much worse? It's hard to imagine something more painful than what Op describes. Bruh, you make it sound like armed robbery just leads to a light tap on the wrist elsewhere. Interesting fact. Males who overstay their visa in SG for more than 90 days are subject to mandatory caning of at least 3 strokes. https://so.agc gov.sg/act/EA 1959. Provids equals PR 15. Do not overstay your visa in Singapore. At least you weren't involved in any sort of drug deal. I know it's my fault, but I do wish my parents had warned me more about the seriousness of justice. Here when we moved back. Still blaming someone else. Own to your own actions. Op is in denial or really stupid. Singapore has some of the strictest laws in the region. I remember learning about the fines they have for just chewing gum back in the day. To blame his parents for his dumb ignorance is just foolish. 12 lashes seem less for the crimes he has committed. But the worst was that they don't tell you what day your caning will be. Sounds like the Japanese approach to the death penalty. You know it'll happen, but there's no date set. They'll just come for you one day unannounced and carry out the hanging. Imagine the pain your victims felt thinking they were going to die. Probably affects them to this day. So now you are blaming your parents for not teaching you right from wrong. Okay, it doesn't look like you have learned your lesson. Armed robbery, whether you had an actual weapon or not, is a serious crime in most countries. Lol, it's not messing around. Glad you are getting back on your feet, and I hope you will stay on a good path regardless of which country you are in. Yeah, caning is known to be painful. Depending on the culture and personal reservations, one might find it deserved or questionable. I'm betting you expected everyone to be shocked at your suffering. However, consider that your physical injuries lasted several months. You're probably healed now. Your innocent victims with PTSD might still not even have begun healing. Some might be stuck for life. Calling several armed robberies messing around shows a lack of awareness or interest in other people's suffering, and complaints on how your parents didn't warn you enough is a strange attempt at shoving the responsibility onto them.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epic Eracast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.